Hello, BookTube. This is week 3 of the Future History Project, something created by Sean D. Standfast. And Scott at the Bookish Bryants is a host with Sean, and so am I. But we have a guest today. What's your name again?
Gertrude.
Gertrude. Steve Donahue from the channel of the same name. He's up here visiting us in Vermont. So this is, and I know you've read this before, Steve, The Complete Robot.
Yes, but not in this edition. I saw that,
What do you think
that
of it?
paperback on, was it Sean D. Standfast who first showed that?
Yes.
It's lovely. It's a lovely looking thing. Really nice dimensions to it.
Yeah.
I just
Comfortable in the hands.
I just don't have it. Who is this? Harper Voyager? When did this come out? Steve automatically checks to see if it's reasonable for him to get one from a publisher.
Oh, yeah, it's on Book Deposit.
2018.
No, they're on Book Depository. They got tons of them.
You have to pay for them.
Well, we don't want any of that. So I'm going to discuss a little bit the 5 stories. I'm going to be very brief about it. If you want more detail, go to Sean or to Scott's channel. We're going to go into it, but then we're going to talk, because I have Steve here, I thought we'd talk about Asimov and some of that era of science fiction. So the first one, the first story is a segregationist. We have a medical situation where somebody's heart's being replaced. And there's 2 choices. There's a synthetic heart that seems to be plastics and all that. And another one is iron or a steel or a metal heart, I guess is the best way to put it. A doctor and what seems to be an assistant are talking back and back. The doctor is really pro-synthetic. It seems like the patients, these human patients come in, want the iron hearts and or steel or whatever it is, and he feels that this doesn't make sense. But they're adamant, and he thinks that people should have synthetic hearts if they're people and metal hearts if they're robots. There comes up a point where he's called the segregationist by his cohort. But at the end, there's a bit of a twist. These aren't mystery stories. Well, this one isn't. So the twist in this case is already out of the bag. You can still read it and enjoy it. It's a good story. You see what the doctor is. The whole time you're thinking one thing and it's another. And it's fairly typical of short stories of this time, and probably even nowadays. I think you probably see a bit of that. That can be tired. In this case, it's not too bad. The next story is... I like the first story. The next story is much better in my opinion, and it's Let's Get Together. We have a Cold War that has continued, like, who knows, century or so or more. There's us and them, or on the other side, it's us and them. Enforced peace because of the balance of power. We would call it back then MAD, right?
Mutual Assured Destruction.
Exactly. And I think that's probably what prompted some of this.
Is that when it was written? Around then?
Yeah, I would think so. Because that went on for quite a while, right? That's actually had a pretty long history. And now the whole time, it's a bit of a thriller. Asimov had a taste for mystery stories. I would assume that he had it for thrillers too. I don't know if he ever wrote straight up thrillers. Do you? Can't think of any. But he did write a lot of mysteries. The ABC.
Yeah, he wrote a lot of mysteries.
Yeah. So
he's just generally in love with plot. Right?
Yeah.
And just the mechanics of plot.
So this is an invasion story. The robots in this story are actually, I don't know, you don't almost call them bombers in the sense that people have been kidnapped basically during travel, and then when they come back, there's a replica or a replicant, we'd probably call it now in later fiction. And they're trying to track these down. There's a guy who has convinced the whole government that these bad guys are going to come. They're going to be random. They're going to target something. When they come together, the bombs will go off. And they scare the government. The government wants to have scientists of every kind meet in one place. Not a great idea. And we'll find out that somebody's been pretty slick. So it's actually a pretty good story. I'm always afraid I'll mix one of these up because I read some of these a while ago. Then we have the tercentenary, which is a lovely word to say really quick, incident. President of the United States, part of a larger community but still very powerful of nations. And it seems like he's glad handing in the crowd, boom, and then he disintegrates a special weapon. We have a special, Secret Service agents, I guess, would you call them, floating around in the sky above. He sees the whole thing, and then all of a sudden the president's on the podium. The story is there was a robot that was a stand-in for the president that was doing the glad handing because of how dangerous it was. The president seems to be shocked by all this, and all of a sudden he seems to be improving as a president. Now, red flags go off only in the Secret Service agent's mind. He's going, the president's the president. He had the character he had. This can't be true. And we see him meet with the secretary, I guess you'd say, of the president and try to convince him. It wasn't a robot that was disintegrated. It was the president. And how do you get that? Number one, the assistant is saying, well, the president we got is way better. But it still would be not who the people voted for running the country. So actually a pretty strong story. This one, what were they? Are they Donovan and Powell? Is that how you say them? Yeah, Donovan and Powell stories. This first one is First Law. Donovan's in a bar. This is the first Donovan story. We've got two of them here. He's in a bar, opens his trap. There's no Powell in this one that I remember. And this is a robot that didn't follow the 3 laws. Nobody believes him. He starts talking about it. It's a tall tale. I get it. It's Donovan in a bar telling a tall tale so he can get free beer. And because he put himself in the spot. Okay, that's fine. It's a short story that John Campbell didn't accept. And I've read it a couple times, and I'm with John Campbell on this one. And I think some of my other folks in the group with me disagree with me, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. But it's too glib. It's a little boring and predictable. And the robot that broke the law was sent out. They're all called Ma, which is really heavy-handed, and then eventually there's a baby robot. So I'm just not impressed, but be that as it may. Runaround is another Donovan and Powell. I actually think is good. I like it probably because it isn't so... I think Asimov had a sort of sense of humor that could wear thin sometimes, at least from my opinion. And this one has less of that. And I like it. It's better because the humor's ratcheted down. I can't imagine spending 5 hours with Asimov at a convention. Probably get a little interesting, I guess is the right word, right? So we're on Mercury now. Mercury's considered sort of a jinx planet, hard to deal with, which it would be. I mean, everything would go wrong because of the sun, right? Previous mining group has gone in. They've got the big tunnels. They actually did a lot of work, but they're seen as a failure. They have these ginormous robots that are there that are just sort of sitting there because they're outdated already. 10 years in technology means a big deal, which it does. And Donovan and Powell, who seem to get their rotten jobs all the time, are sent there. And they got, I think it's selenium or something like that. There's little pools of it everywhere, and they have to get it to fix this piece of equipment, or else they're going to be toast. They give orders under the 3 laws of robotics for the robot to go out, their advanced robot, which they only bring one of, which is not a great idea. It's built for Mercury, it's built to deal with the things, but there's a chemistry problem going on here. There's like volcanic vents. So they've sort of upped the power of the 3rd law on this robot for various reasons, and it causes sort of a loop in its brain. So it starts circling because it doesn't want to kill itself, endanger itself, but has been given an order. Eventually, Donovan and Powell figure out a way using the old robots to get out there and deal with it. And they do a good job on this, and it's got its funny moments, but it's not over the top with that. So I think it made it a stronger story. So those were the stories. Like I say, the only one I really didn't like was Little Bar, Tall Tale, and but I'm glad I read them all. So how long has it been since you've read these?
Some of the ones you described, I remember reading a long time ago. I'm trying to picture the cover of the Mass Market story collection. I'm sure you would know it. I'm sure you had it, same as I did.
Yeah.
I had a short story, a couple of Asimov Mass Market paperbacks
Yeah.
with great old covers. Would never have imagined, that half a century later people would still be reading them. It looked like disposable stuff. But are you reading the Future History Project? You're not reading everything.
We're even reading folks who aren't Asimov.
But you're not reading all of Asimov.
I don't
There's
think
no
so.
way.
So, well, that's true too, right? So we're reading the robot stories, the Empire stories, and the Foundation.
Oh,
stories.
because Asimov himself wove them together after a while.
Yeah, and then some of the stitches are better than the others, right? And they're fascinating to revisit because for all of Asimov's over-the-topness, which was part of his character and part of his brand, I think as much a part of his brand as anything else. When he's effective, he's very effective, and he was grappling with things that we still grapple with. Technology was something we grappled with, and he had an interesting life, and so that comes through in these. The generational humor, I mean, a couple times I think my dad would have chuckled, but maybe I might not
He
have.
kept an eye on larger issues,
He did.
and that makes his works readable now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what allows you to pick him up when a lot of people that shared the pages of the pulps with him aren't readable anymore.
No.
And he's always interesting.
Yeah.
Even if he's not good, there are stories where he's not good, where
Right.
he's clearly just hammering out a first draft on a manual typewriter. But he's never a boring writer.
No.
Not completely. When you know his gimmick, if the gimmick is all there is, you can be a little bit impatient with it. But I am not a host for the Future History Project. I will be joining in on the fun probably when everything moves to the Foundation books. And you say you're reading the 3Bs with the guest.
Oh, we'll read
Foundation
those. We'll read.
It's Bryn, Benford, and Bear.
Right, those are reading. I'm looking forward to them. There's another set that I didn't know about that I talked to you about before, and I can't remember what the names of them are.
Oh, right.
And Sean D. Stanfast posts all that stuff. You can see it. He's really good at hosting because everything's structured, and if there's a change, he gives you a reason for the change. And the short stories have been perfect for me because I'm fairly busy, so you can always fit in a short story somewhere, or eating a sandwich, or drinking a cup of coffee. I can fit in one of these, and they've been great fun. And I think, though I didn't like one of the stories this time around, really we've read, 14, 15 stories here in 3 weeks, and I'm glad we have, because the short story form is how I started in science fiction. I'm not unique in that. I think it was pretty universal. The Digest magazine, almost all of them in here, I've owned at one time or another. The only exception, there was one in a medical journal. Some of these trade type journals actually had pretty big circulations back in the day. So I think when we get to the novels, it may be more challenging, but I do like reading the short stories, and I know they did that. New World's November with short stories.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing a fantasy thing,
Yes.
I think, with short stories.
FFS.
Well, I think that's a good idea, right?
Yeah. Oh,
because sometimes when you do that kind of writing, you're actually creating little gems, and every once in a while I'll run into one or be reminded of one.
The thing I lose patience with Asimov's Future History is that it's obviously ad hoc. He obviously retrofitted it. Unlike Heinlein or Jack Vance,
Right.
or even Cordwainer Smith, The Instrumentality of Mankind. You get after the first few of those, you get the impression that he really was thinking it out ahead of time,
Right.
and just giving you bits and pieces from a larger tapestry. I never get that impression with Asimov. Never.
Right.
He never knew what of the 80 million things he wrote in a month was going to take off, and if it took off, he'd give you more of it.
Right. Well, he's a professional writer. Right?
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
That attitude that I'm going to scattershot 30 stories to 4 different periodicals over the course of a month, and the one that takes off, well, I'll make that into a novel, and then I'll give a sequel, and then there'll be a third book, and then I'll make a prequel. That approach, I understand it perfectly well. It's a work-a-day author. But it's absolutely the opposite of a grand vision. It means you don't have a grand vision. Something, when he was alive and doing this, something about, I don't mind if he elaborates on these stories, but I don't like it when he tries to sell me on the claim that it was always a grand tapestry, that it so
Right.
obviously wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, the stories I'm sure are in this volume, half of them are just one gimmick, one little trick.
Right.
And for him or his apologists to come along 50 years later and say, no, it's all the Matrix, man.
Yeah. No, it's obviously not. We can see it here. And that's why you struggle with the chronology, right? Because it doesn't work.
Because it doesn't work.
Right.
No, he couldn't make it work.
No.
But I'd be curious to see what people make of it. There were 3. There is another spin-off series, but there were 3 Foundation novels. They were authorized by the Asimov estate, weren't
Right,
they?
and we are reading them, and I've got them, and I'm looking for them because they're 3 really good, very different writers, which is going to be
very good.
interesting. Yeah.
I'm really, really hoping that the writers are Greg Benford, Greg Bear, and David Brin.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping that is just a coincidence, because getting all 3 authors with Bs, with their names starting with B, is a very Asimovian thing. If he had been in direct control of it, he would almost certainly have tried to do something like that. I'm hoping that's not the case. And they are radically different. And I've read one of those books. I don't think I've read the other 2 at all.
Yeah.
But imagine letting 3 heavyweight science fiction authors play around with your concepts. I mean, all 3 of those authors have 100,000 times the accurate scientific knowledge that Asimov ever has.
Well, I think the interesting thing, you can't see Heinlein do it because Heinlein worked so hard on the timeline.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
Asimov, I don't think, worked as hard on the timeline, and maybe it was easier to play with. Maybe
Yeah.
it was so. It's a loose timeline. I don't care what anybody says. There'll be people who say, no. You know, Susan Calvin. You know, just look at Susan Calvin. Those dates don't work.
And it invites pastiches and guests in because Asimov puts so many gaps in it.
Right.
It's not a complete story at all. Like, well, other future issues that you could name. Some of them you'd be hard pressed to shoehorn in a story anywhere. But Asimov, the Foundation books, for instance, you read. There'll be 100 years between chapters. Who knows how many stories? And we get when Foundation starts. We're starting well after a large number of stories have been told that are all interesting. I think I will join for the Foundation. If Sean will have me, he might not.
The Foundation books themselves. What about the Bear, Brendan?
Yeah, oh yeah, the whole extended Foundation thing. And I'm assuming, I don't know. Are you going to read a lot of novels? Because you're the only one who's going to say that's really hard to do.
Right. I do know that Sean has
a huge number of Foundation books.
Yeah. So like when we read, Deb, can you? When Mike, I think somebody spilled something in their room while they're video gaming. The little guy did. So the like the.
All the parents that are watching
Yeah,
are nodding
they
right
know
away,
exactly-
because
they
all the
know why I
parents-
just shut
you
down.
always have that one ear
Yeah.
cocked for whatever catastrophe is
Right.
happening that you have to go fix. They're probably all just started looking at that other room, even if the kids have been gone for years. They're probably you never get rid of that instinct.
That's right. So I think like when the Caves of Steel and when you do these types of things, the sort of robot mystery ones, those novels are pretty quick read. They're wonderful. I like them. And some of the Foundation stuff doesn't really bother me. I mean, like I said, I haven't read the 3Bs, I'm going to call them. But some of those novels aren't overwhelming as far as time.
Some of them aren't they?
Yeah, some of
Foundation's
them-
Edge
Yeah,
is a serious
so
novel.
different.
That would.
Oh, he's been good. Sean's been good about the timeline for us, and the timeline for this. But the timeline for us to have a workable, a usable workload. I think it'll take a year. You know what I mean? I don't think it's going to be done in 3 months. or
It'll be an
6 months.
amazing thing when it's done. Deb will put in a link to his channel.
I hope so, because
it's incredible.
he's sort of creating a document for people to go back to for a long time. Much more than I am. I'm reacting to the stories. I'm not doing any of the work of putting all this stuff together. So
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. He's making a video document
right.
of Asimov's extended works,
and I think people will watch it for years to come.
Yeah.
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 So I appreciate him doing that, and I'm glad just to be along for the ride. Like I say, Sean picks the stories and the chronology. I've seen some of the work with the chronology. I think my head would blow up.
I've seen some of that.
Yeah, and I see the reasoning each person
just
puts out. Oh my gosh!
I don't think I could handle it myself, but I've seen that timelines like that are always fascinating. The obsessives, it brings them out of the woodwork.
Right.
Whether it's Asimov or I actually saw a blog of a guy who was trying to do a day-by-day chronology, a day-by-day timeline of the Marvel Comics universe. So we wanted to pick the exact day that the Fantastic Four get their cosmic ray powers, and where is that in connection with the exact day that Dr. Banner was irradiated by a gamma ball? I forget the name of the blog, but he was deducing a lot of this stuff by what clothing people were wearing. So if they were bundled up, he figured it was winter. It's just criminology to the nth degree.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm enjoying these. I'm enjoying these stories. I think the whole timeline thing's fascinating. I'm glad Sean's doing that work and I'm not. I do think it's different than the Heinlein thing. I do enjoy this. Heinlein has his own problems. Maybe chronology isn't it.
No.
But he has his own problems. But then they all have their own rewards too, right? So it's been great fun. The stories I liked. I enjoyed them very much, with the exception of the one little bar.
Are you thinking about rewards? I mean, are you thinking that as you read, as you've been reading these stories, have some of them been a circumstance where you're saying, "I'm really glad that something made me reread this"?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and like I say, it's not just part of it's going back to the short story form because I'm finding how much that helps me with my. On BookTube you get this thing. I did 150 novels this year. Okay, that's congratulations. That's fine. Or you did 20. Equal congratulations in my book because it matters what's going on in your life. But you can fill in a lot of reading time with these short stories and get a big reward. Not just science fiction. I mean, there's if you do it starting with this, and then you're reading, Clifton Fadiman anthology of short stories, and more power to you. So the literature's big. Or poetry or whatever you're reading.
But if you're interested, and maybe you were made interested by the TV show of Foundation.
Yeah.
If you're interested, you're never going to. I mean, this is coming from two old salt science fiction readers. I think you'd agree with me. You're never going to get that guy than Sean D. Stanback.
Yeah, Sean's amazing with it.
Take advantage of him running this show. If you're interested, take advantage and just start getting some of these things. Lots of people on BookTube have this paperback. I'm tempted to get it myself.
It's easy to get a hold of, which is nice. They got a whole series of these volumes. So there's a whole series of the covers that look pretty similar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because most of my paperbacks fell apart a long time.
So what are the other volumes? The complete one volume.
I know they have the Foundation ones. They have a whole bunch of them. So.
In these paperbacks?
Yeah.
Oh, that's tempting.
Yeah.
That's really tempting.
Yeah.
But for copyright reasons, they wouldn't reprint the 3Bs.
I don't know. Maybe if those guys get a check, they'd be fine with it. I don't know how that works. I don't know what they're going to do. So anyway, we want to do a brief little video. I have Steve here to talk about it because even though he's 28, he read them a few weeks ago. So and I read them quite a long time ago myself. And I've really enjoyed getting back to them. And until next week, 5 more short stories, I believe. So most of them from here. I think one from iRobot. I have to see what the stories are.
And the stories, if you want to join in, Sean lists them all, right?
Oh, he lists them all. Or send him an email. He leaves his email on
he can guide you through the reading.
Yeah, he'll get you to where you are. You could catch up with 15 short stories pretty quick order. That's the advantage, right? So that may be a little different when we get to the novels.
And this is not like a Dan Simmons short story. Asimov wants you to get through it quickly.
Yeah.
He's a very easy writer to read.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's another thing. And so that's absolutely true. So thank you, Book 2. Thank you, Steve.
My pleasure.
And we will see you
Well,
soon.
we're only just talking about books all the time anyways, just as they say we turn the camera on. But we're just going to go right back to doing it.
Yeah, the drinking's a little heavier when we're not here. All right. Thank you, Book 2.